Called by Bob Black the Marco Polo of the marginal milieu, Peter Lamborn Wilson is an American anarchist writer, underground intellectual, known for his essays and poems, as well as for first proposing the concept of the temporary autonomous zone, based in part on his historical review of pirate utopias. He has worked with the not-for-profit publishing project Autonomedia in Brooklyn, New York, and has written essays on diverse topics such as the utopian Charles Fourier, Sufi mysticism, technology, Luddism, among many others. His work regularly appears in publications such as Fifth Estate. You may recognize his voice from the Orthodox Moorish Radio Crusade, heard for many years on WBAI in New York. He's also been affiliated with the Libertarian Book Club in New York, as well as the Anarchist Forum. His most recent book is Ecologues, a collection of poems published just recently in 2011 by Stony Hill Press. We can start topically. What makes you excited or discouraged about Occupy Wall Street or this sort of Occupy phenomenon?
As I say, I've never been an optimist by nature. The best I've been able to do over the years is anti-pessimism, and I have to admit, since the Arab Spring started, I've been in a slightly more anti-pessimistic mood, if I can put it that way. I feel kind of bucked up. Not because it's anarchist revolution or even a socialist revolution. These are no words now. But on the other hand, I feel that these movements are similar, they're related, and behind them are many non-authoritarian ideals and ideas that have been percolating around in alternative circles for 20, 30 years now, under different names, and different procedural ideas and different ideas about organization and bottom-up organization and talking about empirical rights rather than theoretical rights and so forth and so on. That all of these ideas actually do, in a sense, come from anarchist theory. And they have informed both the events in Tunisia and Egypt to a certain extent, and they're informing events on Wall Street now. So, from this point of view, I have to admit I'm enjoying it. This is the new generation's time. I hope it's more and better than Seattle, because I think we learned what some things not to do there. I speak as if I wasn't there, but I was there in spirit.
Right.
And I'm there in spirit on Wall Street too. It's just I'm too old to sit on cold concrete benches and whatever else. I mean, I'm sure they're having a wonderful time. They're bonding. It's like a big party. It's a temporary autonomous zone, for sure. I think it was actually sort of structured that way on purpose, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Some of the things, like, for example, a friend of mine was saying that this is a complicated story. I was making an argument all along that modern communications technology, the gee-whiz technology, was not the center and cause and be-all and end-all of the Arab Spring. That this was a misapprehension or misrepresentation on the part of the New York Times and other American media, who were basically saying, deep down, what they were saying was, well, look, we already have all this technology. We have electronic freedom. We're great. We're a democracy. And now these poor schlubs, these Arabs, are so envious of us. And they've got their Twitter now. And they're trying to use their Twitter to bring democracy to Egypt. Well, sorry, this is bull. It's not true. After the events in Iran, which actually really are at the origin of all this, I talked to two of the activists from Tehran, and I put this to them. I said, many people said that the Iranian Revolution of '79 would never have happened without the cassette tape recorder. And now they're saying that what's going on in Tehran today would never have happened except for Twitter and Facebook. And they said, we object to this. This is not our idea. This is wrong. They said, yes, we use these technologies, but in the first place, they were shut down.
Right.
So we couldn't use them.
Right.
And in the second place, they said, human contact is more important. And they said, if you want to know who the real heroes of the events in Tehran were, it was the human newspapers, the guys who stood on street corners with scrawled signs saying, look out, the police are coming. Or, whatever it was, or next meeting in Majlis Square, or whatever it was. And that's how the information was getting around. And so all this time I've been quite sure that this idea of the Twitter revolution is complete. I'm sorry, can we say this on modern radio? It just isn't true. And so a friend of mine said, all right, I understand all that, but Occupy Wall Street is different. It really is at the center of what's going on. And so, I'm keeping an eye on the situation, and I hear that they don't have permit for the PA system, so they have the human microphone. Right. I'm saying, come on. This is like Stone Age technology, man. This is like the whole important thing about Occupy Wall Street is their physical presence to each other there. Yeah. It is not about websites and Twitter and Facebook, no matter how much use is made of that technology as an infrastructure or whatever. Actually, I don't like that word. As an adjunct, let's say. As an adjunct to the basic thing. The basic thing is still a group of people putting their bodies on the line and experiencing solidarity and comradeship amongst themselves. Yes. This is what's going on, and this human mic check that they do is a wonderful symbol of it. Yes. That they don't depend on computers and tape recorders and PA systems and televisions and videos and cell phones and iPods and Facebooks and Twitters. They depend on each other. At least that's my impression from afar. And that's one thing I really wanted to get clear. Because I think, once again, Americans are falling under this entranced misapprehension that this technology is somehow changing their lives for the better. Right. I mean, did the telephone change anybody's life for the better? I'm not convinced, I remain a Luddite. I think that you have to examine and criticize each technology from the point of view of what it does for society, for the social, as well as the individual. Yes. And of the relationship between the two. And, it's quite clear to me that that modern communications technology is a danger to the social, as we understand it historically. In fact, I would, in my bleaker moments, I would say that the social is over. It's finished. The historical movement of the social came to an end with the triumph of global capitalism in 1991. And the reason why people feel that extra edge of alienation and separation that everybody seems to feel now, is precisely for this reason. So all these thoughts I've been running through my mind in connection with the Wall Street thing. Yes. And I think they're doing very well not to make demands. This is perfect. Right. It's got the idiots confused. Right. And the point of it is becoming clearer and clearer to anybody with any brains. Right. They're being very smart so far, right, not to get involved in legislative politics or party politics. Right. If you hear that they've all gone and decided to form a third party, that'll be the end of the whole thing. I'll lose interest in it completely, because the third parties in America, we were talking earlier about the Green Party. These are just hallucinations. They're consensual hallucinations. They're a waste of time, and they do nothing except suck energy out of the possibility of real resistance. One thing I will say is that now that everybody believes that having a website is the equivalent of social activism, there are no food co-ops. The whole idea of cooperativism is lost. I don't think this new generation even knows what it was. They have no concept that in the 70s there were free schools and food co-ops all over America, and that in the 1890s there were producers co-ops, farmers co-ops, and factory and craft co-ops, and that there were federations of labor unions and things like that. There were, what I'm saying? Yeah. So all that history got lost, and now what we have is websites. Right. So just because something physical is happening in Wall Street, it's a welcome change. Yes. And if this tape we're making ever reaches them, I would certainly send them my comradely and revolutionary greetings, in hopes for better things to come, and in hopes that it will go on. Yes. And that the first snowfall won't put an end to it. Right.
And what a crucial point you made. A few that I would like to touch on. But the first that stays with me in your sort of revealing of the false account of the role of social media in the Arab Spring in North Africa and in the Middle East, what was shown there and what has been shown repeatedly, including in Moldova and other places, is that as soon as those forms of communication are perceived as substantially threatening to those in power, they will be cut off. And so the danger of dependency on them seems so crucial.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. And the reason why the developed West seems to be an exception to this is because our governments have basically resigned. Power is with the banks and corporations, and everybody can have freedom of speech as long as they don't have freedom of action. You know, freedom of speech means nothing without the freedom to act on the speech.
Yeah.
And freedom of the internet means absolutely zilch without food co-ops and producers co-ops. At least.
Right.
Let's not use the dirty old S word.
Right.
Or the A word.
Right.
Let's bring back words like mutualism and cooperation.
Yeah.
Sharing, perhaps. I think the Wall Streeters are a bit misguided in emphasizing greed. But if they're going to talk about greed, they should talk about sharing, which would be the opposite. The thing about greed is that it's a human emotion. It's not a political or economic position. It's a sin. And you can't legislate really against sin.
Right.
You know, at least we should have learned that. We should have learned that lesson over the centuries.
Yeah.
You can't change people's minds with law that way. It doesn't work.
Right.
Greed is not the problem. It's like, the Bible actually says it's the love of money that is the root of all evil. But popular wisdom has just changed that, and most people think that the Bible says money is the root of all evil. And in this case, the voice of the people is the voice of God, because they're right.
Right.
Given money, the love of money is perfectly natural and not evil at all.
Right.
Of course, if there's money, you're going to be greedy for money. Good God, that's the way they bring you up. That's the way they train you. That's the way they program you. It's money itself is the problem, and greed is not the problem. On this point, the libertarians they have some right in their argument, I believe.
Right.
The left is all too prone to take the point of view that if only people would change their hearts and souls. Well, if only people could change their hearts and souls, there'd be no need for any of this other activity. Just hey presto, poof. Oh, my soul is different.
Right.
Well, it just doesn't work that way.
Right. You were praising the Occupy movement for so far at least resisting sort of galvanizing around particular demands or particular ideological commitments.
Right. Well, it would be foolish anyway. Suppose they said, we demand that all corporations voluntarily, give 10%, tithes 10% to the social benefit. Well, they'll just say no, won't they? Right. And then where will you be? Demands are silly.
Yeah.
If they could keep up the kind of pressure that they've kept up so far for a couple of years, everything would become clear automatically. People would start changing their positions in order to reflect their relation with the growing power of that movement. And since this movement is on the increase now, since the power is crescenting rather than decrescenting at the moment, you see that many different kinds of people are willing to struggle together. You see that anarchists and libertarians and Democrats and even some Republicans. You see the remnants of the labor movement and so forth and so on. They're all there, I have to say, just like they were in Seattle. And what happened after Seattle, when the power was gone, was that many of those groups discovered that they really had very little in common. And one of the reasons for that is that demands started to be made. If they could have, it's the same thing. I originally noticed this in the Dutch squatter movement years ago. That when the squatter movement was on the rise, everybody was in the same radical movement. Everyone was all brothers and sisters together. As soon as the Dutch government started, its divide and conquer tactics of destroying some of the squats and giving some of the other squats title to the squatters to turn them into landlords, and thereby putting a split right down the middle of the movement. Then, sure enough, everybody started quarreling with each other, And suddenly, the Marxists were throwing rocks at the anarchists, and the anarchists were criticizing the mere left liberals, and everything broke up into the usual acrimonious squabbling that so characterizes the left, usually, historically, so often, so much. And this is a factor. This is about power. When as power is seen to increase, everybody wants to be with it. And so this is why you have this unanimity now. As soon as you start to make demands, well, then one wing of the occupiers are going to say, but wait, that's not our demand, and they'll walk out or they'll start squabbling.
This is WESU FM Middletown. You're listening to the Horizontal Power Hour, bi-weekly source of anarchist news, art, and politics. We're speaking now with Peter Lamborn Wilson, an anarchist writer, an underground intellectual and historian, best known, perhaps, for his proposal of the concept of the temporary autonomous zone. We're discussing the Occupy Wall Street movement. You refer to at least what's going on in Manhattan and the Occupy Wall Street as a temporary autonomous zone, and perhaps it's worth emphasizing the first word, the temporary, and that's something that that's you've in the past acknowledged as something that shouldn't be viewed negatively.
Oh, not at all.
Right.
No.
It's crucial.
I think it's crucial.
Tenet of the thing.
I think it's more crucial now than it was before 1989, 91, when I conceived of it more as a third position. And when the two worlds collapsed, and you could see quite clearly that there was no third world anymore. It's the moment that third world socialism, for example, dried up and blew away without a trace. It's now totally forgotten. With Gaddafi's death, the last remnants of that are gone.
Right.
Then I began to wonder, well, what about the TAZ? Is it still a legitimate tactic in a situation like that where there's no third path anymore? And then I realized, well, then we have to be the opposition. The TAZ has to actually become the revolution. Yeah. In as much as that phrase makes any sense, and we don't know what sense it could make because it hasn't happened yet. But that's the only possibility I see. That all the TAZs and all the energy of the TAZs have to eventually flow into something that vaguely resembles, I hate to say it, an institution, but there you are. You've got eventually, and this is clear in anarchist theory, we're not against institutions and organizations. We're a little bit leery of them, Right. We don't trust them so much.
And also, another point you brought up earlier, which I think is, which I'm curious in following up on, how it seems like the practice and the method that these people seem to be employing seems to be in many ways influenced by a revision within maybe the last 30 years of at least North American anarchist thinking, and it's a revision that you've been implicated in, and I can ask whether that's a characterization you're comfortable with, but what's sort of broadly and perhaps erroneously referred to as post-left anarchism, and for instance that's celebrating the spontaneity and the temporality of this Occupy movement, and less of an emphasis on kind of class-based organizing for a big revolution. Mm-hmm. But that may be a mischaracterization. So.
Well, it's a partial characterization. I mean, you quoted Bob Black at the beginning. He was one of the people who was theorizing this more than me. This beyond left and right thing, this insistence that anarchism had nothing to do with either the left or the right, or that it was after them or against them or something. What exactly was the position? We never clarified it, and I don't think it ever became a new type of anarchism in that sense. It just became, or not a new dominant type of anarchist theory. It just became another theory to add to the Gallimaufry and the unstructured bazaar that non-authoritarian theory and practice has always been. This is why when the comrades in New York founded the Libertarian Book Club back in 1947, they decided to take Emma Goldman's phrase, plumb line anarchism. Like, are you against governments? Good. Okay, you're one of us. Don't ask any other questions. Let's work together. Afterwards, get rid of the enemies, then we can fight over what we actually believe and what we want to do. There's some, you got to do this, especially, as I say, in periods where there's no power. You have to emphasize the fact that you're not ideological. You're not going to exclude people the way the Situations did until the party's down to 2 members. It's all very romantic, but it just is. That was then. This is now. We don't want to do that anymore.
Right.
People are always asking, can libertarians and anarchists work together? Well, I've always managed to do it. I don't know about other people. I don't agree with their economics, but they're, virulently anti-government, and we have many things in common.
Right.
So I think it's good that there's been some understanding that leftism as an ideological stance was counterproductive. But not that not to throw babies out with bathwater.
Sure.
But in 1989-91, it collapsed so abysmally that the impulse was to get off, to be like a rat and get off the sinking ship.
Right.
In fact, we should have called ourselves rats. That would have been good.
I think Jason McQuinn came close several times.
Essentially, I remain an individualist because what can you do?
Right.
There is no social movements. You have to be an individualist.
Yeah.
But in as much as there's ever a possibility of the Fourier side of things, I'll always be for it.
Sure.
So if that makes me paradoxical or something, well, too bad.
And your response is a recognition that even whatever these so-called post-left critiques are, that it's an internal critique, that the post is the break implied by the prefix post is never as complete as maybe it sounds like it might be.
No, but then it would have to be post-right as well,
right.
And really, honestly, post everything. You
Right.
know, if that were a possible stance, maybe we could occupy it. I don't actually see it as being really an existent stance.
Yeah.
It was more a panic moment.
I see.
The Soviet Union was like a big corpse in a bathtub that took down everything with it, all the rubber ducks, all the soap, the sound of history disappearing, and everybody panicked. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, is it time for anarchism now? Well, apparently not, Apparently the demise of the totally discredited historical movement of the social was going to take everything else down with it.
Yeah. Also, though, getting back to the Occupy movement, it seems like there's, at least to some extent, a recognition of something that may be in part a result of the influence of feminist intervention, or maybe indigenous influence as well, but sort of a broadening within the concept of anarchy or anarchism of the state, and sort of as not the exclusive agent of power to be wary of.
Absolutely.
And I love, there's this perhaps overquoted, but I think it's worth it, repeating, and also it again reveals the extent of, you emphasize not reinventing the wheel. This is Gustav Landauer from 1911, I think, that saying that
my favorite year,
the state is not a condition. The state is a condition, a certain relationship between human beings, a mode of behavior.
Yeah.
We destroy it by contracting other relationships, by behaving differently,
That's
not
right.
by an armed overthrow.
That's right.
In the way that it may have one
the
time
state,
postulated.
he great prophet that he was, prophet and martyr, saint and martyr that he was. He foresaw this this terrible flaw in Marxism, that it was going to bet all, and historical anarchism,
Right.
and which I guess is why he called his book on socialism, which turned out to be weak. It's one wishes that he could have thought of a stronger word. But absolutely, this has always been clear work on. And anarchists are all too inclined to fetishize the state, oddly enough.
Right.
And to say that, if only we could just get rid of it, then everything would be hunky-dory. But that's not right. And Landauer said in 3 sentences, he made it clear that that's not right.
Yeah. Some of, I think, your most interesting and provocative work is engaged in what I would consider to be an even deeper critique in sort of speculative metaphysics and challenging sort of pervasive Western ontological understandings of human nature, binaries, and imagining, and definitely influenced by different indigenous traditions. And so this is very different from where we were before, or maybe not.
I've also always been interested in spiritual anarchism.
Right.
And in fact, if I have a profession, which is dubious, it would probably be history of religions, histories of religions. It's my continual fascination as a scholar and a reader and a traveler, as I used to be. And so I've always been open to the idea of what is actually a tiny minority within anarchism, which is called spiritual anarchism. It includes, like, a Catholic worker, for example, whom I have great respect for, and those people influenced by Taoism, anarcho-Taoism, or as you say so rightly, indigenous and tribal culture, which, as we learned from the anthropologists in the 60s, like Marshall Salins and his crew, were for a million years carrying on a non-authoritarian society. Our understanding of that is now, I think, sharper and more focused, thanks to works by Pierre Classe and, in recent years, David Graeber and James Scott. And
Who's been on this show?
Both of them?
David Graeber, not. But
No,
James
you ought to
Scott
get
has,
Graeber, too, because
he's hard to read.
I guess so, right.
He's a busy guy.
Yes, he's a busy guy now, right. Basically, the idea came up. I think the reason why he liked my work is because I may have come up with this idea fairly early, which is that, see, the neoconservatives began making a critique of the 60s,
right,
non-authoritarians like Salins, and saying that they were essentializing the idea of primitivity, that there was really no such thing as a primitive society in the ethnographic present,
right,
or as we might say in the modern world, and that in fact most of these societies they were looking at might very well have at one time been agricultural, and have drifted back due to some inherent failure or inferiority into an earlier, more primitive economic condition, e.g. hunting and gathering or primitive agriculture. And I thought about this for a long time, and then I realized, but wait a minute, if they did that, that's actually the grooviest thing ever, right, because they chose the non-authoritarian possibility, having experienced authority. This idea came to me as I tried desperately to interpret the effigy mounds in Wisconsin. So my essay on the effigy mounds in my book about the 19th century is where I discussed this, and I came up with the idea of reversion. And I said that reversion would be the most liberatory idea that we could have in anthropology. That there's an actual dialectic already going on amongst people whom we had thought were too primitive for the dialectic. And that when white people arrived in America, there was already a philosophy of mentoring the wilderness and of regaining the connection between consciousness and nature because of the whole Mississippian culture that had devolved into cannibalism and class warfare. If you've read about it, it's horrific. It's like the worst of the Aztecs. Was right there, not more than a few hundred miles away from Wisconsin. So I figured that suddenly I saw the whole puzzle is, why are these hunter-gatherers making earth art? It shouldn't have happened. It's an anomaly in anthropology. Right. Hunter-gatherers don't make big works of art that are permanent. Well, first of all, that's wrong. But second of all, if it were true, then how did they get this into this strange art form? I figure what they had been suffering being the slaves and food of these so-called Mississippians or Cahokians, that they had broken away. They said, we still know what the right way for human beings to live is. It's hunting and gathering. And here, look, we're going to make our kind of mounds, not defensive, warlike mounds, not burial mounds, not morbid mounds, living mounds about living things. Look, this is our alphabet of nature, you know. This is our Quran. We're teaching the right way to live in nature here. And so then this is when I realized that reversion, was a great thing.
Yeah.
So now Graeber and Scott and some of these other people are studying this in detail and saying, well, yeah, actually it does seem to work that way. And so I feel like I did a good thing there.
Yeah, and
I don't know if anybody got that idea sooner than me. Because the immediate response was to defend the primitive.
Yeah.
To defend the 60s pure ideology of the 60s against these nasty, nattering neoconservatives who were saying, no, Indians, they destroyed all the megafauna.
Right.
How can you like those people? Which, by the way, is total crap. They did not, 20 or 30,000 Paleo Indians did not wipe out the mammoths in North America. I'm sorry, it just didn't happen. I was there. I saw it. It was the weather. It was the change from the Ice Age.
I was interested in your play. Using the term reversion seems to imply the maintenance of sort of kind of a teleological Western understanding of progress, which is clearly something that you're not interested in maintaining. So if you use reversion, but then you later call the Cahokians, the Mississippians, as devolving, which would be contrary to the traditional understanding with Cahokians like achieving elements of a high civilization.
Of course, whatever. That's why you get 30 books about the Cahokians for every tiny monograph about the effigy mounds. Everybody can figure out the Cahokian and Mississippian mounds. It's like modern society. But nobody can figure out the effigy mounds, so nobody writes about it. I was stunned when I got there. I said, how come I didn't know this? How come I haven't seen coffee table books on this?
And the Cahokians so fleeting in their endurance compared to these alternative ways of living, which
No, I use the word reversion with a little smile.
A
little touch of irony, I have to admit. Maybe we could think of a better term that would be, that would avoid this whole dialectic of progress.
No, but I just wanted to flag that because I think it's something that...
As a Luddite, my position should be clear.
Of course.
If you made a mistake in your technological development, you should go back to the point where before the mistake.
And so this...
And that's been done before. And now we're getting evidence from anthropology that's done all the time.